Houston Real Estate Radio.
Welcome back to Houston Real Estate Radio on this great Father's Day weekend. Excited to spend the Father's Day with you this afternoon. And we've got a great guest with us here that we were talking with last segment. It's Jess Bailey. She's a partner at Bailey Law Firm, and she got into some really great information for landlords. There are a lot of people who haven't been landlords that are kind of diving into becoming a landlord because there's such great opportunity right now for purchasing real estate with the low interest rates and all these short sales and foreclosures that have been on the market. It's a great opportunity to buy rental properties. And so Jess has been talking to us about some really interesting things. One of the things I want to recap from last segment, we were talking about LLC. So if you want to just recap that, I think was great information.
Sure. So let me go in a little bit more about the LLCs. Now, when you're a landlord, you don't want property in your name personally, because if an oops or something bad happens, you can be sued and be personally liable for that judgment and that suit.
Which means they can come back on all your properties and your house and your cars and your business, everything.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you don't want that. You want to limit as much liability as possible. So what you need to do is have an LLC. I recommend 2 LLCs. A series LLC, which is new in Texas, but was originally born in Delaware. Texas law has pretty much photocopied Delaware's series LLC, and Delaware is known for its pro-business codes. And so Texas just copied it over here to allow series LLCs here. Series LLCs allow you to have multiple properties in one entity, but limit the liability of House A from House B.
So it's kind of like a shell, and then you have all these different properties inside of it. Is that right?
And each house has its own little liability bucket. So then if something bad happens at House A, it doesn't hurt House B.
Okay. So if you're going to have multiple properties, you definitely want to do that. Do you recommend it for someone who's just going to own one property, one investment property?
If you're going to own just one investment property, you can have a single LLC.
Okay.
Another thing that I recommend is a second LLC to act as your property management company. If you outsource your property management, I still recommend having a property management company for your LLC. And the reason why is because you want all of your tenant contracts, vendor contracts to be in that LLC's name.
Do you recommend property managers or property management companies? I have landlords ask me this all the time. Should I use them? Should I not? And it really comes down to weighing what you want to do. Do you want to make more money, or do you want to and do the repairs yourself, or do you want to have somebody else kind of take care of the headaches for you? Do you agree?
Right, and it's really up to your own personal preference. Some people do this as a passive income stream. Well, if you're seeing this as more of a passive income stream, then I definitely recommend you having a property management company. It's not going to be passive if you don't have someone else managing. Do you really want to have to be responsible for that 2 a.m. phone call when a water line breaks? Probably not. You have a property management company. They help you help you weed out some of the rental applications with your realtor. They also help you. They have qualified handymen and vendors that are on their approved list, so that it really helps you in lots of different areas.
You mentioned applications. I know as a realtor, we have promulgated forms, and one of our forms is the rental application. Mm-hmm. And that works really well for just gathering all the information and giving it to the landlord so that they can make a decision, is this someone I want to rent to or not? But we know that you can't discriminate against people, and so they have to have a reason why they deny a tenant. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, the applications and that whole process?
Sure. So what I always recommend is for landlords to have qualifications of that property. Their debt-to-income ratio. Do you want their income to be 3 times what the rental payment is? Those types of qualifications, certain qualifications on their credit report and such. In this way, if you do reject someone on that rental application and they come back and say it's discriminatory, you can say, well, you didn't comply with 2, 5, and 6. And then you have backup and that written policy that you can show this is why. It had nothing to do with any of the protected classes.
That's definitely a good idea. And there are some certain things that you cannot waive in the lease also. Is that correct?
That's correct. Some duties and responsibilities a landlord cannot waive in the lease, and it's void. All those waivers are void if they try to do it. Those items are security devices, locks and such, security deposits, and landlord's disclosure of ownership and management, utility cutoffs, and also installation of smoke alarms.
Yeah, those are very important.
Definitely.
You know, Rondalyn Riley was on earlier, and she was talking about pool inspections. And when people are buying houses, they have to decide, do I want to put in a pool? Do I want to buy a house that has a pool already? And of course, we know in Texas you need one.
Yes.
So pool's very important in Texas. So we were talking about if you're going to buy a resale house, what do you need to look for as far as inspections? What about for tenants and landlords? If you're going to rent a property, or on the opposite side, if you're going to be the landlord and rent out a property with a pool, what are some of the things that you need to be aware of?
Well, you need to be aware of the rules and regulations when you have a pool on your property. It's considered a private nuisance. You need to make sure that you abide by having a fence and those other issues that are in the health and safety code, and that have all the rules and regulations about pools. Even though you're not living on property, you own that property. You are responsible for things that happen on that property.
And, you know, tenants definitely need to have renter's insurance.
Yes.
I highly recommend that, of course, to salvage everything inside the house should something happen. But what kind of insurance do the landlords need to keep on the property? They need liability, correct?
Yes, they should definitely have a general umbrella policy for all of their properties. They should always have a fire policy, and a flood is important whether you're in a flood zone or not.
Yeah, we know lots of places flood that aren't in the flood zone.
Exactly.
Do you have any tips or recommendations for landlords specifically that you want to discuss?
Yes, get a network. Join real estate investor groups. They are great resources. Try to figure out what has worked and not worked for them. Don't make all the mistakes yourself. Learn from others. If you can learn from other people's mistakes, that will definitely smoothen the path of being a landlord. You can also, from those groups, you can get great referrals for vendors like plumbers, electricians, attorneys, CPAs, all of insurance brokers, really people who know the industry that you're in.
Do you, well, I know that you recommend that people in Texas go to an attorney and have everything reviewed by an attorney. What do you say about those leases that you can pick up at Staples or you can find them online?
The problem with the ones online is it's a drop-down list for what state you're in, and then the computer automatically inputs that state into the lease. It doesn't mean that it's compliant with the state at all. It has not been reviewed to make sure it's compliant with Texas. And each state is different.
Very specific to the state.
Right. And the ones off the shelf are probably not written in Texas either.
We talked a lot about property code. Where exactly should we go to find out what the property codes are? Like if you're becoming a new landlord and you need to find out the 2012, codes that are out there, most current, where should they go?
Well, where they should go is the Texas Legislative website.
Okay.
And the reason why they should really get it from that website is because if you just Google it, you may find other websites with the code, but it may not be the most recent.
Okay.
The 2009 code is not the same as what's in law now.
It gets updated every year. Is that right?
It gets updated every time there's a legislative session.
Oh.
Which is every 2 years.
Okay.
But there are things that phase in and out every year. So even if they're not in session, there may be a change of a law that has, sunsetted or come into effect and phased in.
Well, there's definitely a lot of property codes. You're not going to be able to memorize all of them, so you might as well just either save a copy of it or print a copy of it. If you go to legis, legis.state.tx.us, that is the legislative website. You can go to the Texas statutes and go right to that property code. And I think that that's really important for landlords to review that. And, it's really important for tenants to be aware of it too, but definitely want to have a copy of that. It's very important to know what you have to do and what you don't have to do, because there are a lot of little things you have to do, like rekeying between tenants and having your smoke alarms and certain locks on the doors, depending on what kind of doors there are. And, it gets specific. And so you really need to be aware of all of that. Tell us if there are landlords that have properties in multiple states, what do you recommend for them? If they have a house in Delaware, one in Georgia, one in Texas, what do you say to those landlords? Because my husband was in the military, and I'll tell you, a lot of people in the military will buy a house everywhere they're stationed and then rent them out. And when you become a landlord in a lot of states, you've got a lot of different property codes to follow.
Exactly, and that's where your attorney is very important. Because you can have those properties in an LLC, and you don't always have to have an LLC in every state. If you're not doing your own property management, you can have the LLC in Texas hold all of those properties.
So if you have a Texas attorney like yourself, a real estate attorney, right?
Yes.
If you have a real estate attorney here in Texas, they can kind of guide you on all of those other properties. You don't necessarily have to have an attorney in every state. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And if you have a good real estate attorney in Texas, they have contacts in other areas when something comes up that they don't understand or is very different from the state that they're used to working in.
Okay. And tell the listeners out there how they can contact you.
Well, my law firm is Bailey Law Firm. My phone number is 832-510-2900. My email address is Jess, Jess, @lawyer.com. And my website is bailey-law-firm.com.
All right, great. So if anybody out there wants that kit, contact Jess and she can get that to you. I want to wrap up this segment, and we'll be right back in just a minute after this commercial break. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.